I'm really, really excited for the signing of Steidten, to be quite honest with you, because if he's left to do his thing, if he's given control, if he's given money, if he's allowed to do what he did at Leverkusen, it feels that success is almost inevitable. Now I'm putting a lot of expectation on him here, but you can only look at his previous job, and it's hard to not get excited off the back of that. And the fact that he's joined gives me confidence and reassurance that he's been given reassurance, that Steidten has been given promises, because why else would he join West Ham? His stock is high. He's got a good standing in football at the minute. His CV is really impressive, and he was in demand when he left Leverkusen in March. Since then, he had formal talks with Chelsea. He's been linked to Liverpool and Spurs. Now, whether he had talks with them or not, the rumours were there, and he would be able to go to a lot of clubs. There would been a lot of interest in him, and he's come to West Ham United. Now, obviously, we're a big club. We've got a big fan base, but that only has so much appeal to anyone, whether it be a player, whether it be a manager, whether it be a technical director in this case. They still want assurances over their job. Steidten's still going to want to have had that conversation with Sullivan and possibly Newman and possibly David Moyes about how he will be able to operate at West Ham. And off the back of those conversations, he's decided that West Ham United is where he wants to continue his footballing journey. So while his profile has risen pretty quickly in football, it's probably easier for the downfall to happen as well. If he has a car crash of this summer at West Ham, that stature that he's got at the minute, that credit he's got, would disappear pretty quickly in football. And if he was to leave West Ham, I'm not sure he'd be going to the likes of Chelsea. He would still get another job somewhere, but he might have to go back to the Bundesliga, because that's where his profile will have been. So is it a gamble come to West Ham? To some extent, but he will have done his own due diligence to make sure that this is the right choice for him. And I imagine that would have come from assurances from David Sullivan, which is, this is what you can do, this is how much money you've got to spend. I think that 100 million, that sale of Declan Rice, must be pretty appealing to Steidten, actually, because I expect any technical director or director, the guy in charge of the transfers, I expect him, anyone that does that role, to be licking their lips at the prospect of spending 100 million in a summer transfer window. You'd be backing yourself to the absolute hilt. You'd be thinking 100 million, God, I know exactly who I'm going to get, and I can go get these top players in. 100 million to somebody in that position is massive. That is a huge budget. Huge. So he should be excited. And I imagine the lure of that is one thing, but I think he would have wanted reassurances over his control at West Ham. So the fact that he's joined gives me belief, a little bit of confidence that he's got that. And should he be given that, I'm really excited for this, actually, because this will change how West Ham do things, and it feels like a long-term appointment, which isn't something we can always say at West Ham. But it's not just the player recruitment as well, it's the manager recruitment. And this isn't even a dig at David Moyes, this is a dig at David Sullivan, really. Last season, when there was rumours that Moyes may get sacked, and you looked at some of the names being linked to us, Rafa Benitez, I preferred David Moyes over some of the names that were being linked to. I prefer to have kept David Moyes. But now going forward, it won't be hopefully, it won't be David Sullivan in charge of that managerial recruitment. So next summer, assuming everything goes what we feel is the plan, which is Moyes sees his contract out, he's got a year to go, we get through next season, Moyes departs at the end of his contract and we go get someone else, that's when I can get excited. I couldn't get excited about a potential new manager last season. Well, first of all, I didn't believe they were going to sack Moyes, but second of all, like I said, the potential replacements weren't really all that. But now, with somebody else in charge, with Steidten in charge, you can start to get a little bit excited about the direction of the football club. But anyway, join West Ham, he has. We can look forward to the summer transfer window. And I've been a little bit worried about who's spending the money. But one thing that that reassures myself is some of the signings made at Leverkusen while Steidten was there. Whether he was directly responsible or it was somebody else that found these players and they brought them in, it doesn't really matter. I look at it as almost a team thing, a management thing. If the players brought in under Steidten has been found by someone else, but Steidten has authorised that signing, then that's good management by him. Well played to the scout as well. But some of the players that Leverkusen have bought over the last few seasons while he's been at the club would work under David Moyes. Jeremy Frimpong, for example, coming from Celtic, he'd have been fine. He would have worked under David Moyes. Would the development still be the same? Would the trajectory of the player's career still be the same? I don't know. That's open to debate and discussion. But as an initial signing, I see no reasons why that wouldn't work. You've even got, like, say, Demarai Gray. He went to Leverkusen for $2 million. If we bought him at that time, I mean, it didn't work out at Leverkusen and came back to Everton for a similar price, 1 goal and 10. But as a player, he'd be fine under David Moyes. Hudson-Odoi went on loan. He'd be fine under David Moyes. Patrick Schick as a striker, he would probably be fine under David Moyes. There's plenty of players that have joined Leverkusen under Steidten that actually I think would fit how West Ham currently play under David Moyes. That gives me a little bit of hope, because I was a bit worried about, well, what direction are we going to go in during the summer transfer window? Are we recruiting players to fit David Moyes' way, although that he's only got a year left in his contract? Or is Steidten going to go do his thing and go off and recruit who he wants that perhaps might not fit? Now, obviously, we know what the ideal scenario is. There's a conversation, Moyes says, I need X, Y, Z, and Steidten goes, gets X, Y, Z. That is the ideal scenario, and hopefully that is how it plays out. And I don't see any reason why it shouldn't, because while the infrastructure within the club at the minute, the scouting part of it, may not be up to scratch and it may not be how Steidten wants it, and he will mould that over time. It can be done quickly. Look at Newcastle United. Look how quickly they've done it. They've overhauled their scouting process. They've overhauled how they scout youth players, cherry-picking staff from each club, including West Ham. They've taken one of our staff. So it can be done pretty quickly as well. But this is where the advantage Steidten has, is he's very, very data-driven. So while he's rocking up with his portfolio, he's a numbers guy. He recruits through numbers. Not just numbers, but they certainly identify who to go for. That's already in place at West Ham. Steidten's already got that information. He's able to run the data to identify the players for them to go and proceed and get. And that gives me hope, because sort of the old school methods, if you like, which is physically going and scouting players, that takes time, and that takes a lot of time. And it's not really something we've got. We need an impact from Steidten immediately. Starts work on a Monday, bids go in on the Tuesday kind of thing. That's how quick we need him to get to work. But he can, because of his methods, because he is data driven, he can start making that instant impact. The one thing I'm looking forward to is potentially signing younger players. They've done it at Leverkusen. They've brought in players, and they've gone into the under 17s and under 19s, and they've had to wait a few seasons before they see them in the first team. And I'm hoping there's elements of that with West Ham as well. Now, obviously, the youth team's going well at the minute, but we still need that succession planning, if you like. And we speak about Brighton as the ideal model, and this is a step in that direction. But the player recruitment of Brighton is only half the battle. I think the other half is the player development, which is something I think it gets dismissed a little bit too easily. I think it's almost like, well, why can't we buy like Brighton? But you can do that, but you then need to develop them like Brighton do. Brighton have got their network set up with a Belgian club where they can loan players out for a couple of seasons, and then when they're required for the first team, they're now ready. They've had all that first team experience elsewhere. So that's something West Ham are great at. In fact, I would suggest we're really bad at it, loaning players out. We're not particularly good at sending our youngsters out and they have a successful year. We bring them back in and they're ready for the next stage of the development. Is that something Steidten can do? There's little evidence of it. So there's more layers required for West Ham to start utilising a better, more efficient player recruitment. That's only half the battle, but at least it's half a battle that's won. But what it should do is instantly improve the player recruitment for the first team. Now, I actually don't think last summer's was that bad. It gets a lot of criticism. I don't think Newman and Moyes did a bad job last summer. I think the transfers were largely successful as a collective. Not ideal. Obviously, the Schumacher one's the big question mark. But when you move away from him and Cornet, but again, both of them were injured for large parts of the season, but those that weren't, I thought were relatively successful. I think Kerr had a good season in the end. I think Emerson had a decent season. I think Paqueta had a good season. Areola had a good season. And I think actually the player recruitment wasn't too bad, but I'm excited for this one as well. But the last point I'm excited for is Mark Noble. When we hired him as sporting director in January, and there were sort of queries over what his responsibilities were going to be, because traditionally it would include player recruitment, it would include appointing and firing the manager. And there was concerns and legitimate concerns over whether Noble was qualified to do that job. And the January transfer window came and went, and there was rumours about Noble being unhappy. Moffey was the name at the middle of it all, because we signed Ings, didn't sign Moffey, and there was rumours Noble was really not happy about how we went about our transfer business. And it just felt like we had an apprentice what's the word? Well, just stick with not happy. We had an apprentice not happy with his role, but there was no senior management in place that was doing his job. It feels like we've got one now with Steidten, and this is where I hope Mark Noble learns a lot from what Steidten does, because long term, Steidten's replacement might be Mark Noble. It might just be that Mark Noble now takes over from Steidten however many years down the line, and that should be the succession plan. So between now and then, I hope Noble's able to just absorb everything that Steidten knows and does about player recruitment, and is able to teach Noble, so that if Steidten ever leaves, we've got that succession plan. Because I still think this is still wild. If you go back to Huselos and Pellegrini, forget whether you like the signings, this is not the point. The point is, Huselos came in and they spent a lot of money between them, and then they left together. My point was, but when they left, everything left. All that player scouting, all the data that we had archived while they were there, all that plans we had made in terms of transfer strategy, the scouts themselves, when Huselos left, everything went. We had to start again. We had like League One standard stuff going on when they left, despite being in the Premier League, and we can't allow that to happen. We can rely on Steidten, but what we can't do is make sure that we don't have a plan B where Huselos II occurs. And that would be Mark Noble learning on the job, literally, from Steidten. So I'm excited. This is a really good appointment. We get this right, it will be massive for West Ham. And it's hard to not. It's just hard not to be excited when you see the success of the signings he's made at Leverkusen. And we do have a big transfer budget this summer. Even if we only spend the Declan Rice money, it's still 100 million. That is a lot of money for our new technical director to spend. And then, like I said, in 12 months' time, we imagine we'll have a new manager to appoint. It's big changes at West Ham. This is a big change, but it's a domino effect now. The changes that he's going to make will be big. It's risky. It's not guaranteed to work. I'm a little bit wary of it. I think it's just because it feels like we've maybe got different sort of ways, if you like. We've got an old school manager with new methods and how we go about player recruitment, and that's how that worries me a little bit. It makes me a bit nervous how that's going to marry up. But should that not be an issue, then hopefully we'll be fine. But like I said, I still feel this is easier to get wrong than it is to get right. But if we get it right, it'll be massive for the club, and that's what the potential of getting it right is what makes me excited. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this, please do drop a like on it. Subscribe to Hammer's Chat. Anyway, West Ham got a new technical director. Catch you in a bit.